Alright, how's it going, y'all? Today we were back in TrueNAS Core, and this time we're going to be installing a jail. And this jail is called HomeBridge. And HomeBridge is a really great app that allows you to basically have any of your smart devices, or even other devices, become HomeKit accessible devices. This means you'll be able to use any of your smart devices with Apple's HomeKit as long as they've got a plugin within HomeBridge, and almost all of them do. It's a really great app, especially if you're already in the Apple ecosystem like I am, where it's really nice being able to bring everything in, and you're even able to bring in something like a Raspberry Pi, start making your own controllers. And that's actually what I'm going to be doing here, but that's going to be a separate tutorial on how to actually set that up. I'm just going to go over the basics here on how to get something working. So first off, what is HomeKit? If you don't know what HomeKit is, it is basically Apple's ecosystem that allows you to have different smart light bulbs all communicating together and run by Apple. You can access them anywhere in the world as long as you've got an Apple device in the house running as the base station. And so with this, it's actually really great, and I really enjoy it. And I've just got Hue bulbs on here, but I want to start expanding this out because I really do one day want to have a complete smart house. And with HomeBridge, I'm actually going to be able to start programming my own stuff using a Raspberry Pi, which I'm really excited about, but I'm probably going to also damage all the electronics in my house. All right, so now on to what HomeBridge is. HomeBridge is kind of exactly what it sounds like it is. It is a bridge for HomeKit. Basically what a bridge is in Apple's ecosystem is something that communicates to other devices to control them. So basically you have HomeKit talks to this bridge. This bridge then controls all of the things that HomeKit tells it to. This way you don't have to have every single one of the devices talking directly to Apple. Instead, you can have something like a base station where you've got all of your light bulbs contacting this one bridge rather than every single one of them on your Wi-Fi network, which can be good and bad for different use cases, but generally it allows much cheaper and it can use different frequencies than Wi-Fi, so you don't end up overloading your system. And so you basically have your light bulbs always talking to your bridge and your bridge always talking to Apple. And that way, if Apple wants to do a command, say you say, "Hey Siri, turn on my lights." Basically what it's going to do is it's going to send that command to the bridge and the bridge will tell the lights to turn on. And this is what HomeBridge is. HomeBridge is basically an open source way to add any application you want into this bridge. And so there are already tons and tons and tons of plugins out there that have already been written for HomeBridge. And so there's a good chance whatever smart device you have will be compatible with HomeBridge. And so HomeBridge will be able to allow it into the Apple HomeKit system. And so it's a really great way to bring everything in and have one single control system. All right, and so now let's go ahead and get started. This is incredibly easy to get this plugin, and honestly, I've been very impressed by how TrueNAS has handled plugins. There's not a ton of them, but the ones that it does have seem to work really well. And so we're just gonna go ahead and log into our TrueNAS Core build, and we're gonna go down into plugins. And so a plugin essentially becomes a jail. And so if you look right here, there are very few apps, but these are only the IX Systems approved ones. Then there's the community versions. These are the ones that are developed by other people, but if they show up here, they're very well maintained generally. And so we're just gonna scroll all the way till we see HomeBridge right here. And so we're just gonna select it and click install. It's gonna say, hey, this is an unofficial plugin. We don't take any issue if something breaks. So we're gonna say continue. And we can set up super easily. We'll just call it HomeBridge for the name. And instead of using DHCP, I'm actually just gonna set it up with an IP4 interface. So I'm using lag 0, which is my 2 lag 10 gig connections, and I'm gonna give it an IP address. And it's gonna be on the /16 subnet. You can use DHCP if you'd like to, but I would really recommend having your router hand a static IP address every single time, just because that way you never have to worry about, oh shoot, what's the new IP address of HomeBridge? Instead, it's just always at the same place, and it's just a lot easier to work that way. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and click save. And this is gonna take a few minutes to install it, but once it's done, it basically does everything for us. All right, and so while that's installing, I figured I'd go over what a jail is and what a plugin is. And so jails and plugins are basically the same thing. A plugin basically is a pre-set up jail that you can download and say, okay, I want a plugin for this. And it's an application very similar to Docker that's like, okay, I'm gonna create a jail that's already set up for this thing. And you can think of both of these very similar to Docker containers. I believe FreeBSD actually had jails and plugins before Docker was even created, but honestly, Docker has just completely taken everybody by storm, and almost every single computer has the ability to run Docker containers, Windows, it does run in an emulation of Linux, but it's still very great to have all these different applications across all these different systems, and they all just seem to work pretty well. I've run into a couple of issues, but overall I've been pretty impressed by Docker. Though unfortunately, FreeBSD's plugins never really caught on across everything because they were only available on FreeBSD systems, and quite frankly, I don't know a ton of people who run FreeBSD who are not running a TrueNAS or FreeNAS build. Almost everybody I know just runs the Linux kernel if they're running something on a server, just because it's really easy and it's so supported with everything. But overall, jails work pretty well. I have had a few problems where if I want to do something like mount an SMB container within a jail, I have to mount it first on the system and then into the jail, and I've been kind of confused on that in terms of writing my own stuff for jails, but overall it seems to work really well with the out-of-box applications. Though sometimes I have had crashed installs and things like that and had to go in and tweak some settings, but it seems to work pretty well. And it's a great way to start adding a bunch of applications to your system without taking up a ton of system resources. Since jails are just small sections of your operating system kind of closed off in an I/O container, it doesn't have to run a virtual machine and have all of that overhead over everything just because you want a application sequestered off. It's halfway in between an application and a virtual machine that seems to be a pretty good middle ground. Though it is not as clean as just a virtual machine where you can do anything you want in there and set up anything, but it does work quite well. It even gets its own IP address, which is really nice to have to really section these things off. Alright, so now that that's finally gone ahead and installed, we can go ahead and open it up right here. We can see it right here, and we can see the admin portal. And honestly, all we have to do is copy this and paste it into our browser. And just like that, it is all set up for us. The first time login is admin. And so this is HomeKit. The first thing we're going to want to do real quick is change our password. So we're going to go into user accounts, and we're going to edit it and just change the password. You can create other users. Honestly, you probably don't need to. You're probably the only one who's going to be managing this. So I just changed the password just so we have some security, but honestly, it's not too big of a deal. It's only running locally. All right, and so now let's go back into the HomeBridge. And so now we can see everything it's got. And so a couple things to point out. If you look at the CPU, RAM, and uptime, this is not what the HomeBridge is. It's been online for 7 days, it says. But in reality, these are all the stats for my TrueNAS build. That's because they're actually sharing the same kernel, so it all has the same information in there. And so that's why we're going to get something different here. All right, and so now pairing a device is incredibly easy. Just go ahead and open up the HomeKit app on your phone and just hit the plus sign, and we're going to add an accessory. And for scanning it, it scans it just like that, and we just click add to home. It's going to say, hey, it's an unverified accessory. That's because, well, it's open source and done by us. So we're going to click add anyway. And we can say where it is. And we'll call it FreeNAS or TrueNAS. And so just like that, we have now added it to our device, but we've not added anything into it yet. And to do that, we're going to go back into our HomeBridge webpage and we're going to set this up. So from within our HomeBridge settings, we're going to go into plugins. And this is where you can install all of your plugins. You can Google them to find different ones or just search them. So I'm going to be doing this one real quick on a Raspberry Pi. And so just like that, you can see all the different applications that are available to you. I've actually used this one, so I've already got my Pi set up for this. So we're just going to select it. You can also go into the GitHub pages to see all of them. It's overall really easy to use and works really well. And so all we're going to do is click install. And so in half a second, it just worked. And so now you just set up the settings. I'm not going to go super in depth for this. I'm actually going to do this on a separate tutorial onto how to use HomeBridge with a Raspberry Pi. But I'm going to set this up, and whatever plugin you use, you just need to set up and add it in. And so I'll go ahead and do that real quick. All right, so now I just changed some settings there. And so now every time you need to restart it. And basically this restarts it and allows you to start anew and does all your configurations. It restarts really quickly, so it's not too big of a deal, and you're very rarely doing this level of configuration. All right, we've just added in, and basically, as you can see right here, all these logs are saying, hey, yes, it is working. All right, and so now we're just gonna go into my HomeKit app. And so just like that, we can see that, hey, look, there's this temperature sensor over here. hey look, there are all these different things that are now on here. That's actually the temperature sensor of the Raspberry Pi. And so it passes that in and it says what the Raspberry Pi's temperature is. And you can do other things too. For the Raspberry Pi, I've got a button and a light that I've got set up. All right, and so now let's test it out. I'm gonna show you this right here. And if I turn on the Raspberry Pi light, it works just like that. And we can also set up the button to do something. So a single press, I'll say turn on this light. And so now I'm just gonna hit the switch right here and you're gonna see on my face, it's gonna be lit up. Once more. It's a little clunky, but overall it works. One more time. And just like that, the light turns on. And so there's a ton of other things you can do with this. And overall, I think it's a really cool setup. All right, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and turn this off. And overall, that's how easy HomeBridge is to use. You can add anything in there, especially other smart devices, without having to buy their expensive extra hardware. It's really nice, and honestly, the Raspberry Pi gives so many great options. You can easily set this up as a garage door sensor and have a smart garage door, even though you don't pay for one. They're really easy to use and a great use of those nanos with Wi-Fi because it only requires a little bit of GPIO power and nothing else. All right, well that's gonna be it for this tutorial. I hope this was helpful. I'm actually really excited to start playing with all this stuff. Go ahead and leave any other tutorials you'd like to see me make in the comments below. And if you wanna hire me, I've got a link for that in the description. All right, have a good one. Bye.